In the cold depths of space, a faint distress signal pierces the void, carrying the desperate cries of an alien child stranded on a rogue planet. Captain Elena Morov and her crew aboard the Voyager Ascendant race to the source, discovering a fragile life abandoned by its own kind. As they navigate the tension between compassion and fear, they must challenge a powerful alien race's prejudices to offer a child a chance at survival. But with no guarantees of success, the crew faces a moral dilemma: save the innocent or respect the laws of an unfamiliar world. In a galaxy where fear often overrides mercy, humanity's unwavering belief in kindness could be the one thing that changes everything. Can they defy the odds and give this child hope? The crew of the Voyager Ascendant, a human exploratory vessel, had been navigating the vast expanse of the outer rim of known space. Their mission was to chart nebulas, catalog minor planets, and observe the wonders of the galaxy. It was routine, yet peaceful, as they moved further into the uncharted areas beyond. But one day, their calm was interrupted when a faint, garbled distress signal came through their communication systems. The transmission was barely audible, full of static, but something in the pattern of the noise caught Lieutenant Darius' attention. As he worked to enhance the signal, the room fell silent, the tension growing. The audio became clearer, revealing a series of panicked, childlike cries that sent a chill through the crew. The cries were frantic, as though they were coming from someone in desperate need of help. Along with the crying, an unfamiliar alien language mixed with the static, its cadence unintelligible. The universal translator, though a powerful tool, struggled to make sense of the fragmented words. Only broken phrases emerged: "Help me," "trapped," "danger," and a desperate plea: "Please, anyone." Lieutenant Darius adjusted the frequency, trying to enhance the audio further, his dark eyes narrowing as he sought to extract more information from the signal. The crew looked on, holding their breath, as the voices continued to cry out in distress. The sound was unsettling, with a raw sense of fear that transcended the language barrier. The distress signal, though faint, was undeniably urgent. It was as though the transmission was a cry for help from the very edge of known space, reaching out into the unknown. Captain Elena Morov, who had been monitoring the situation closely, leaned forward in her chair. Her sharp features were tense, her focus entirely on the signal. She had heard countless distress calls during her time in command, but this one was different. There was something haunting about the desperation in the child's voice. She knew they couldn't ignore it. Humanity had encountered many alien species since they joined the interstellar community, but there was a universal truth that all sentient beings shared: the instinct to seek help in times of dire need. "Captain, I think you'll want to hear this," Lieutenant Darius said, his voice carrying a note of urgency. He had been working furiously at his station, trying to pull more information from the signal. His voice was strained, the gravity of the situation settling over the crew. As he adjusted the equipment further, the message became clearer, and the crew could hear the pleading in the alien voice more distinctly. "Help me," it repeated, echoing the terror in the voice that seemed to come from nowhere. Morov, her mind already racing with possible scenarios, quickly made a decision. She stood, her commanding presence filling the room. "Locate the source," she ordered. Darius immediately began triangulating the signal, his fingers flying over the controls. His eyes flickered across the display, pulling in data from sensors. "Triangulating now, Captain," he replied. "It's coming from a system just beyond Zeta 142. There's a rogue planet in interstellar space, no known settlements." Without hesitation, Captain Morov issued her next order: "Change course. Full speed." The crew sprang into action, preparing for what was to come. The Voyager Ascendant shifted course, its engines humming to life as it surged through the void. There was no time to waste. Every second counted. The crew knew that they had no idea what they might face upon arrival, but they were prepared to act. Humanity had spent centuries in space, often viewed as newcomers and underdogs in the galaxy. Yet, when it came to acts of compassion, humans had earned a reputation for stepping in where others hesitated. This mission, though unknown in its outcome, would be no different. The ship's engines hummed steadily as it cut through the darkness of space. The stars around them seemed distant, cold, and indifferent to the mission at hand. The crew worked together with quiet efficiency, determined to answer the call for help, no matter what awaited them on the rogue planet. Captain Elena Morov stood at the helm of the Voyager Ascendant, her eyes fixed on the starboard view, her mind already processing the urgency of the situation. The distress signal had shaken her, but she knew that as a captain, her responsibility was clear: to make decisions swiftly and effectively. The ship was already altering its course, heading toward the coordinates that Lieutenant Darius had pinpointed. The faint cries of the alien child still echoed in her mind, urging her forward with a sense of determination that left little room for doubt. "Lieutenant, confirm the new course," Morov said, her voice calm but firm, the weight of leadership evident in her tone. Darius, though focused on his station, heard the command and immediately began his task. He quickly rerouted the ship's navigational systems, ensuring that the Voyager Ascendant would be on course to reach the rogue planet in the shortest time possible. The hum of the ship's engines shifted in response, a subtle but noticeable change as the vessel adjusted to the new heading. The crew knew that they were about to enter unknown territory, and the tension among them was palpable. Darius's fingers danced across his controls as he refined the signal's exact location. The signal's origin point is a rogue planet just beyond Zeta 142, he reported, his voice steady, yet tinged with a sense of curiosity. It's a planet with no known settlements, no major celestial bodies nearby. It's drifting in deep space, far from any established routes. Morov's expression remained unchanged, but internally, she was already weighing the implications of this. A rogue planet with no settlements meant there was no established infrastructure, no way to know what they were walking into. It could be dangerous. The thought of approaching a planet isolated in such a manner wasn't lost on Morov. A rogue planet, drifting through the cosmos without a sun, could be hiding many secrets, some of them potentially hostile. Yet the distress signal, especially the cries of an alien child, outweighed the risks. She trusted her crew and believed in the mission to help. Humanity had always been driven by compassion, and now, in this far corner of space, they would once again prove that this core value would guide their actions. As the ship continued its course, Morov addressed her crew with purpose. "Prepare for a possible hostile environment," she ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with, but we do know someone is in need." The crew responded quickly, readying their equipment and preparing for whatever might lie ahead. It wasn't just the physical dangers they had to consider, but the unknown challenges that the planet might present. Temperature extremes, potential atmospheric anomalies, and perhaps even alien life forms they had never encountered before. Lieutenant Darius continued to monitor the situation from his station. His fingers moved rapidly over the instruments, refining the tracking systems as the Voyager Ascendant sped toward the rogue planet. The closer they got, the more he could sense the unease creeping into the crew. They all knew the risks, and they all understood that this mission was a test of both their skills and their humanity. They were explorers in a vast, uncharted galaxy, but they were also protectors of those in need. The planet finally came into view, and it was as cold and desolate as the data had suggested. A frozen world, drifting through the cold void of space, with no warmth from a star to sustain it. Morov studied the planet's appearance through the ship's viewports, her gaze narrowing. Despite the apparent emptiness of the planet, there was something about it that called to her, urging her to proceed. She wasn't about to let an abandoned child be left to the harshness of this world, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. "Activate long-range sensors," Morov ordered. "Let's get a better read on the surface." Darius quickly complied, his eyes scanning the readouts as the sensors began to gather information. What they discovered next confirmed the presence of something unnatural on the planet's surface, an artificial structure embedded deep in the icy crust. It was old, alien, and yet unmistakably built with intention. This was no natural formation. Someone had been here, and it was their job to find out who. "Captain, there's something down there," Darius said, his voice tense. "It's not a settlement, but it's definitely a structure. Morov nodded. The team was ready. The Voyager Ascendant was on its way to a strange and dangerous world, but they would face whatever challenges arose, knowing they were there to help. The Voyager Ascendant glided silently through the cold vacuum of space, its engines humming steadily as the rogue planet loomed closer. As the ship drew nearer, the harsh beauty of the planet became clearer through the viewports. It was a barren, frozen world, its surface covered in thick layers of ice and rock. No stars or suns bathed it in warmth. It drifted in a sea of darkness, its location a mystery, isolated far from any known systems or civilization. The coldness of space seemed to seep into the very essence of the planet itself, and yet something about it beckoned them forward. Captain America stood at the command console, her eyes scanning the readings from the sensors. Despite the eerie silence surrounding them, she could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. The distress signal had led them here, and she knew that whatever they were about to find, they had to act quickly. Lieutenant Darius had already begun preparations for the descent. The ship was close enough now to begin the landing process, but Morov felt a twinge of unease. The unknown could be far more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Darius, working at his station, reported the status of the landing sequence. We're entering the planet's atmosphere now. Surface conditions are cold, extremely cold. The structure we've detected is located in a valley just ahead. His voice was steady, though the implications of what they were about to face weighed on him. This wasn't a normal planet, not in any sense. There was a lingering, unsettling feeling in the air, and it only intensified as they descended. The crew's collective focus sharpened, knowing that they might be stepping into something ancient, something that had been abandoned for reasons they could not yet understand. As the ship made its final descent, the crew watched as the ice-covered surface grew larger in the viewports. The structure, a faint shadow against the white landscape, became visible. It was an imposing, yet strangely delicate construction, its walls etched with intricate spirals and symbols that none of them recognized. The architecture was alien, unlike anything they had encountered before. The building was old, far older than any human-made structures, and its age was only emphasized by the frost and ice that clung to it. It appeared as though it had been abandoned, left to the ravages of time and isolation. The Voyager Ascendant landed with a soft thud on the planet's surface, the ship's landing gear stabilizing on the icy ground. The crew prepared for their departure, donning their advanced environmental suits to protect them from the harsh conditions outside. The air was thin, and the temperature was so low it could freeze a person in minutes. Yet there was no time to waste. Morov led her team, Lieutenant Darius, Dr. Aya Patel, the ship's xenobiologist, and a handful of other crew members, toward the airlock. They knew they had a mission to complete, and each member was driven by the need to help whoever was out there. With a hiss, the airlock doors opened, revealing the alien landscape. The team stepped out onto the frozen ground, their boots crunching against the thick layer of ice. The cold bit at their exposed skin, even through the suits, but there was no turning back now. Morov led the way toward the structure, her gaze never leaving the path ahead. The building was not far, but the silence of the place, the utter stillness, made it feel as though they were the first to set foot here. In centuries, every step they took echoed in the emptiness, amplifying the feeling of isolation. They reached the structure's entrance, a massive door embedded in the ice. It appeared to be sealed shut, but the markings on the surface were unlike any they had ever seen. There was a faint, almost ethereal glow from within, hinting at some form of power still lingering in the depths of the building. Darius approached the door first, using his tools to try and access the mechanism that might open it. The structure had clearly been abandoned for a long time, but the technology that powered it seemed to still have some life. After several attempts, the door groaned open, revealing a dim interior. Inside, the air was stale, but the temperature was slightly more tolerable than the outside world. Flashlights flickered to life, cutting through the gloom. The walls of the chamber were covered with strange, intricate symbols, some of which seemed to pulse with an alien energy. The air was thick with dust and the scent of something old, something long forgotten. The team moved cautiously, every footstep heavy with the weight of the unknown. In the center of the room, they found what they had come for, the source of the distress signal. A small, transparent containment pod sat on a pedestal, and inside it a child. The sight was both heartbreaking and surreal. The child, an alien of some kind, was alone in the dark, abandoned in a place far from home. Inside the chamber, the small alien child lay curled up in a transparent containment pod, its fragile form seemingly untouched by the ravages of time. The pod hummed faintly, its life support system struggling to maintain the child's existence. The glow from the bioluminescent spots on the child's skin cast a soft, eerie light across the room, highlighting the child's pale blue-green complexion. Her large, luminous eyes were wide open, fixed on the humans who had entered. There was fear in those eyes, but also an unmistakable glimmer of hope, as if she recognized that her salvation had finally arrived. Captain Morove knelt beside the pod, her heart aching at the sight of the small, frightened creature. The pod's display readout indicated that the child was alive, but the life support systems were malfunctioning. The readings showed signs of extreme malnourishment and weakness, suggesting that she had been left in this state for a long time, abandoned to survive in isolation. Morove's eyes softened as she looked at the child, who seemed so vulnerable and alone. "We're here to help," she whispered gently, reaching out to comfort the child despite the glass barrier between them. Dr. Aya Patel, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped closer, her eyes scanning the pod systems. Aya's expertise in alien biology had prepared her for many strange encounters, but this one was different. The child before her was unlike anything she had ever seen, and the fear in her eyes was enough to stir any compassionate heart. Aya examined the pod, noticing the faint hum of the life support systems and the flicker of failing lights. "We need to get her out of here now," she said, her voice low but urgent. "If these systems fail completely, she won't survive much longer." The child's eyes locked onto Aya's, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition, a silent communication passing between them. The child's voice, weak and trembling, finally broke the silence. "Help me," she said in a soft, almost pleading tone. Her words were clear despite the strange, alien language, and they struck the crew like a heavy blow. "I don't want to be alone." The words echoed in the room, their meaning simple and heartbreaking. The child had been abandoned here, alone, with no one to comfort her, and now she had reached out in her time of need. Aya turned to Captain Morove, her expression grim. "We can't leave her here," she said. "We have to get her back to the ship immediately. She's barely hanging on." Morove didn't hesitate. She knew what had to be done. "Prepare to move her," she ordered. The team began to work together, carefully removing the child from the pod. The fragile alien form was delicate, and the life support systems were already failing. But with each passing moment, it was clear that the child needed immediate attention. Aya, with her experience, gently cradled the child in her arms, her eyes filled with empathy as she looked down at the tiny, vulnerable creature. As the team moved quickly to carry the child back to the ship, the child's eyes never left them, her gaze filled with a mixture of fear and trust. Her words echoed in the minds of the crew, especially Aya. "Why did you come? Why did you help me?" Aya's heart swelled with emotion, and she answered softly, as if speaking directly to the child's soul. "Because we couldn't ignore you," Aya said. "We never leave anyone behind." It was the simplest, most honest truth she could offer. The humans had a reputation in the galaxy for their compassion, and this was a moment that would prove their commitment to that belief. The journey back to the Voyager Ascendant was swift, and the crew moved with purpose. The airlock hissed open as they entered the ship, and the medical team was ready. The child was immediately placed into a specialized medical chamber, where the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. The scans confirmed what they had feared. The child, though biologically intact, was severely malnourished and dehydrated. She had been alone for far too long. It would take time and careful care to nurse her back to health. As the medical team worked, Aya stayed by the child's side, offering comfort in the form of quiet words and gentle touches. The child's eyes fluttered open occasionally, gazing at Aya with gratitude, but also lingering fear. "What will happen to me?" she whispered once, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Aya smiled softly, reassuring her. "You're safe now. We'll take care of you." The child's eyes filled with tears as she murmured a name, Vaya. Aya nodded, understanding the unspoken message. "Vaya," she repeated, her voice soothing. The child had a name, an identity, and she was no longer alone. As the life support systems in the medical bay hummed steadily, the crew knew their mission was just beginning. They had a long road ahead, but they had made a difference. They had given this child a chance. The Voyager Ascendant moved steadily through the dark expanse of space, its crew focused on the task at hand. The child, now named Vaya, was stable for the time being, but her condition remained fragile. Dr. Aya Patel, along with the medical staff, worked around the clock to monitor and improve her health. Despite the best efforts of the crew, Vaya's recovery was slow, and there were moments when it seemed uncertain whether she would fully recover from the trauma of being abandoned on the rogue planet. Captain Morov stood by the observation window, staring into the vast emptiness of space. The image of Vaya's fragile form, so small and vulnerable, haunted her thoughts. How could any species abandon a child in such a way? The thought of Vaya's people, the Zari, kept coming back to her mind. She knew that they would have to face them soon, but the unknowns about this alien race made her uneasy. If they were responsible for abandoning Vaya, how would they react to the humans intervening in their ways? Morov's thoughts were interrupted by Lieutenant Darius's voice. "Captain, we've pinpointed the location of the Zari Enclave," he reported, pulling up a star map on the console. "It's on a temperate world in a nearby system. We've been able to establish communications, though the Zari haven't responded to our initial messages." Morov's eyes narrowed as she studied the data. She could sense the resistance in their reluctance to speak with the humans, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. Vaya deserved answers, and Morov was determined to get them. "We'll need to make contact again," Morov said decisively. "Tell them we've found one of their own, a child named Vaya. They need to take responsibility for her." Darius nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The Zari would not take kindly to the humans interfering in what they considered a cultural matter, but Morov was not concerned with their comfort. This was about the child, and no matter the cost, they would make sure she was not forgotten. Meanwhile, Dr. Aya Patel remained by Vaya's side, offering her words of comfort as the child slowly regained her strength. Vaya's eyes were still filled with confusion and fear, but there was a spark of hope now, something that had been absent when they first found her. She had begun to speak more, though her voice remained soft and fragile. "Why did they leave me?" she asked one day, her eyes wide with the innocence of a child who had been betrayed by her own people. Aya paused, choosing her words carefully, knowing the weight of the question. "Sometimes people do things out of fear," Aya said gently, "but that doesn't mean it's right." Vaya nodded slowly, though her face was still etched with sadness. She had been told that her illness would bring death to others, a belief deeply ingrained in her people's culture. The thought of being cast out for something she couldn't control weighed heavily on her. Aya's heart went out to her, and she gently stroked the child's hand, offering her comfort. "You're not sick, Vaya. You're just different, and that's okay," Aya said, her voice a calming presence in the storm of the child's mind. The bond between them was growing, and Aya could see the trust beginning to form. Captain Morov's determination did not waver as the days passed. They continued to search for answers, sending more messages to the Zari and trying to make them understand that Vaya was not a danger, that she was a child who deserved a chance. It wasn't just about helping Vaya. It was about showing the Zari that humanity was willing to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. Morov's frustration grew with each failed communication. The Zari were a proud people, and their reluctance to acknowledge their wrongdoing was clear. But Morov knew that this wasn't just a matter of diplomacy. It was a matter of moral responsibility. Finally, after weeks of searching, they received a response from the Zari leaders. The message was brief, yet filled with reluctance. "We have heard your plea," the Zari leader's voice echoed through the communication channel. "We will accept the child back, though we cannot guarantee her safety." Morov stood at the communications console, her hands clenched into fists. This wasn't enough. Vaya deserved more than to be taken back as an outcast. Morov's expression hardened. "Tell them we will not back down," she said. "We will make them understand that no one should ever be cast aside." The Voyager Ascendant made its way to the lush, temperate world where the Zari Enclave was located. As they arrived in orbit, the planet's beauty contrasted sharply with the cold, desolate world they had left behind. The Zari were waiting, their shimmering forms standing tall as they looked upon the humans with an air of superiority. They greeted the crew of the Voyager Ascendant with measured caution, their eyes assessing the humans who had come to challenge their customs. Morov stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "We found one of your own. Her name is Vaya. She is not a danger. She is a child who was abandoned and left to die." The Zari leader's eyes flickered with a hint of disdain. "She is an outcast," the leader replied. "Her presence among us could bring ruin. She is dangerous." Morov's expression tightened. "She is not dangerous," she shot back. "She is a child, and you abandoned her. Humanity would never do such a thing." The room fell silent as the Zari murmured among themselves, their bioluminescent spots flickering in complex patterns. The tension was palpable. After what seemed like an eternity, one of the Zari elders spoke. "You do not understand our ways," the elder said. "Her presence among us could be disastrous." Morov took a deep breath. "We understand more than you think. Humanity has faced its own fears and prejudices. We have learned that abandoning our own only weakens us. Vaya deserves a chance, and we will not let you deny her that." The words resonated in the room, and after a long deliberation, the Zari agreed, albeit reluctantly, to take Vaya back. But Morov knew this wasn't a true acceptance. It was only the beginning. The child would go back, but she had been changed forever. And so had the humans who had answered her cry for help. The moment of Vaya's handover to the Zari delegation was one filled with heavy emotion. As the crew prepared to return Vaya to her people, the tension in the air was palpable. Vaya, though physically stronger than when she had first arrived aboard the Voyager Ascendant, was still fragile in both body and spirit. She clung tightly to Dr. Aya Patel's hand, her small form trembling as the time to part drew closer. The child's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and uncertainty, her gaze shifting between Aya and the Zari elders who stood waiting. The heart-wrenching truth of the moment was that Vaya, despite everything, had grown attached to the humans who had rescued her, and the thought of being returned to those who had cast her aside was terrifying. "Will I see you again?" Vaya asked softly, her voice trembling as she looked up at Aya. Tears welled up in the child's large, luminous eyes as the question echoed in the room. Aya's heart clenched at the sound of the child's voice, and she knelt down beside her. Her hand gently cupped Vaya's small face, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. Aya's voice was calm, but filled with sorrow as she spoke. "I don't know, Vaya, but remember, you are stronger than you think. Never forget that." The words were meant to comfort, but they could not shield the child from the pain of separation. Aya's heart broke as she saw the fear in Vaya's eyes, knowing that the child was about to face an uncertain future. Vaya nodded slowly, though her hands remained tightly wrapped around Aya's fingers, reluctant to let go. The small alien child, so full of fear and uncertainty, now faced the difficult task of re-entering a society that had abandoned her in her time of need. Aya couldn't help but wonder what awaited Vaya back with the Zari, a race that valued purity above all else. What would they do with her now that she had been rescued by humans? Would they accept her, or would they continue to view her as a threat? Captain Morov watched the exchange between Aya and Vaya with a sense of pride and sadness. The decision to return Vaya to her people had not been an easy one, but it had been necessary. As much as the crew of the Voyager Ascendant had grown to care for the child, it was not their place to keep her forever. The Zari were her people, and it was their responsibility to decide her future. Still, Morov couldn't shake the feeling that the Zari would never truly understand what they had done for Vaya, nor the sacrifice that was being made by both the child and the humans who had intervened in her fate. As Vaya was gently led toward the Zari delegation, she turned her head one last time to look at the humans who had shown her kindness. Her luminous eyes met Captain Morov's gaze, and for a moment, the fear in her expression softened. She gave a small, shaky smile, her voice barely audible as she said, "Thank you for hearing me." The words struck Morov deeply. At that moment, she realized that Vaya had not just been rescued physically, but emotionally. The child had felt heard, felt seen, something that had been missing for so long. That Morov knew was the most important gift they could give. Morov's chest swelled with a sense of pride and sorrow as she watched Vaya turn away, following the Zari elders into their midst. The humans had answered a call that no one else had bothered to hear. They had done what others might have feared or avoided. They had stepped in, regardless of the consequences, and provided comfort to a child who had no one. The thought that Vaya would now go back to the same people who had cast her out was difficult to bear, but Morov took solace in the fact that Vaya would at least know that someone cared. That knowledge, Morov hoped, would carry the child through whatever hardships lay ahead. Aya, still kneeling, watched as Vaya walked toward the Zari elders, her small figure shrinking with every step. The bond they had formed over the past days was undeniable, and Aya knew that it would be hard to let go. "I'll never forget you," Aya whispered under her breath, though Vaya could not hear. Aya rose to her feet and took one last look at the child before she turned to Morov. Her expression was solemn, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. "We did what we could," she said softly. "Now it's up to her." The Zari elders, their glowing forms casting a soft, almost ethereal light in the dim room, took Vaya from the humans with an air of reluctance. The delegation's leader addressed the group, his voice formal and tinged with tension. "We will take her back," he said. "But remember, this is a great responsibility." His words were cold, distant, and it was clear that the Zari were not welcoming Vaya back with open arms. Morov had known that their reluctance was inevitable, but hearing the leader's words only reinforced her belief that the Zari had yet to learn the true value of compassion. It was a harsh reality to accept, but one that had to be faced. As the handover came to a close, Morov took one last look at the child, her heart heavy with the knowledge that their part in Vaya's journey was over. The humans had done what they could. They had given Vaya a chance when no one else would, and now it was up to her to shape her own future. The crew of the Voyager Ascendant had left an indelible mark on the child's life, and in the deepest corners of space, that was something that could never be erased. As the Voyager Ascendant prepared to leave the lush, temperate planet, the crew gathered in the briefing room, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and contemplation. They had done what they set out to do, saved a child, given her a chance, and ensured that she would not be forgotten. But the lingering questions remained. What would happen to Vaya now that she was with her own people? Would the Zari truly accept her? Would they understand that their fear had been misplaced, and that she was not the danger they had imagined? The uncertainty weighed heavily on the crew, but none of them could deny the deep sense of fulfillment they felt. They had acted out of compassion, and that, in itself, was something they could be proud of. Captain America stood at the front of the room, her arms folded as she looked over her crew. The silence between them spoke volumes, each member lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Morov broke the stillness. "We did the right thing," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We gave Vaya a chance, and that's what matters. Whatever happens next is beyond our control, but we made sure she wasn't abandoned. We heard her, and we acted." There was a quiet nod from the others, each of them understanding the weight of her words. The mission was complete, but the emotional toll of the experience lingered. Aya, who had been particularly close to Vaya, spoke next. Her voice was soft but resolute. It wasn't just about saving her. It was about showing her that someone cared, that she mattered. Her eyes were distant as she continued. "I'll never forget the look in her eyes when she said, 'Thank you for hearing me.' That was all she needed. A reminder that she wasn't invisible, that she wasn't alone. Aya's words struck a chord with the rest of the crew. They had all seen that same look in Vaya's eyes, fear mixed with a desperate hope, and they knew that the small act of kindness they had shown had made all the difference. Lieutenant Darius, usually reserved, spoke up with a tone of reflection. In the end, we didn't just help her. We challenged the Zari to look at their own beliefs, to question their fears. Maybe that's the real victory here. He paused, glancing around at his fellow officers. We didn't let her be a victim of their prejudice. We made them see that their way of thinking is flawed. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step toward change. The crew exchanged thoughtful glances, realizing that Darius was right. They had not only helped Vaya, but had also challenged a deeply ingrained societal belief. That, too, was an important part of their mission. Morov gave a small nod of agreement. "You're right, Darius," she said. "We didn't just save one child. We made a statement. We showed that humanity will always choose compassion over fear, and we will never stand by when injustice is being done. This is the legacy we leave behind." There was a quiet sense of pride in her voice, and it resonated with the rest of the crew. They had acted out of a deep sense of moral responsibility, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what humanity stood for. As the Voyager Ascendant prepared to depart the system, the crew took a final moment to reflect on the journey. They had gone from charting nebulas and cataloging planets to rescuing an alien child and challenging the beliefs of an entire species. It had been an unexpected mission, one that had tested their resolve and their commitment to doing what was right. The crew had been changed by the experience, each of them carrying with them the memory of Vaya and the lessons they had learned along the way. They had gone into the unknown to help a stranger, and in the process, they had discovered something about themselves. On board the ship, the mood was a mix of quiet satisfaction and somber reflection. The crew knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but they were more united than ever in their shared purpose. They had learned that even in the vastness of space, where the unknown lurked around every corner, humanity's capacity for kindness could ripple out and touch the lives of others. And in that moment, they understood that this was what truly defined them. Not their technology or their power, but their ability to act with compassion in the face of uncertainty. As the Voyager Ascendant entered the fold of the stars once more, Captain Morov stood by the observation window, watching as the distant planets faded into the void. She thought of Vaya, of the child who had been abandoned and then given a chance. "We may never know what happens to her," Morov whispered softly to herself. "But we gave her a chance. That's what matters." Her words were a quiet affirmation of their mission, a reminder that even when the outcomes were uncertain, the act of giving someone a chance could change everything. The stars stretched out before them, and for the first time in a long while, Morov felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. As the Voyager Ascendant sailed through the vast emptiness of space, the crew continued to reflect on their recent mission, each person processing the events in their own way. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant, a comforting reminder that they were moving forward. Yet the questions of what would happen to Vaya hung in the air. They would never know how her life would unfold after they had left her with the Zari, but they all understood that they had done something monumental. They had chosen to act when others might have hesitated, showing the galaxy that compassion could thrive even in the coldest of corners. The thought of Vaya and the uncertainty surrounding her fate lingered in the minds of the crew, but there was a shared understanding that their mission was not just about one child. It was about the values they upheld: kindness, empathy, and the willingness to challenge prejudices. The crew knew that they had set an example for the rest of the galaxy, one that would resonate beyond their immediate actions. They had shown that humanity would not stand idly by in the face of injustice. Their decision to help Vaya had sent a message that reverberated across the stars. Kindness mattered, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. For Captain Morov, the mission had reinforced something she had always believed, but had never truly been able to express so clearly until now. Leadership wasn't about power or authority. It was about responsibility and the ability to make difficult decisions in the name of something greater than oneself. In this case, It was about making sure that a child wasn't left behind, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Morov had steered the ship through countless challenges, but this mission felt different. She had led her crew, not just with strategy, but with heart. Aya Patel, the xenobiologist, had been especially affected by the mission. She had spent days caring for Vaya, learning about her species, and providing comfort in the child's darkest moments. The bond they had formed had been profound, and Aya knew that Vaya would stay with her forever. "We'll never know what happens to her," Aya had said earlier, as she watched the child disappear into the Zari delegation. "But at least we gave her a chance." Aya's voice had been full of conviction, and though she couldn't say it without a heavy heart, she was at peace knowing that Vaya's life wasn't defined by abandonment, but by the compassion of those who chose to help. Lieutenant Darius, who had been the first to detect the distress signal and bring it to Moreau's attention, couldn't shake the feeling that the mission had changed him. His usual skepticism about the complexity of interspecies relations had been challenged by this encounter. Seeing Vaya, an alien child, abandoned and afraid, had struck a deep chord in him. "It wasn't just about saving a life," he said to the crew later. "It was about showing that we can change the course of someone's destiny. We can make a difference, even if it's just one life at a time." His words resonated with the others, reminding them that even small acts of compassion could have far-reaching consequences. Back in the common area, the crew shared quiet conversations as they resumed their daily routines, but there was a noticeable change in the way they spoke. They no longer discussed the mission in abstract terms, or with the detached professionalism they usually reserved for scientific exploration. There was a new depth in their words, a sense of awareness that their actions had rippled beyond the borders of their ship. They had chosen to act from the heart, and in doing so, they had become something more than explorers. They had become agents of change. As the Voyager Ascendant continued its journey through space, Morov and her crew carried with them the unshakable belief that their actions mattered. Though they could not predict the future, they had chosen to do what was right. The mission was a reminder that the true strength of any society was not in its technological advancements or its military might, but in its ability to show compassion, even in the most difficult circumstances. It was the way they acted in the face of adversity that would define them. And in this moment, humanity had shown the galaxy that kindness was not a weakness, but a strength. The crew also realized that this mission had served as a subtle reminder that the galaxy, for all its complexity, was still governed by simple truths. The need for compassion, the desire to make a difference, and the ability to challenge established norms were universal forces that transcended species, borders, and beliefs. The crew of the Voyager Ascendant had witnessed firsthand that, even in a galaxy teeming with diversity and danger, there was still room for humanity's most basic values to make an impact. It was a humbling thought, and one that would remain with them for the rest of their journey. As they moved farther from the Zari enclave, with each passing star bringing them further away from the event that had defined their recent mission, the crew knew one thing for certain: the universe would continue to challenge them. But no matter what came next, they would face it with the knowledge that they had made a difference. Their willingness to listen, to understand, and to act on behalf of a child in need had set a precedent for how they would approach future encounters. And perhaps, just perhaps, that one act of kindness would be enough to inspire others to follow suit. After all, sometimes the smallest actions could ripple across the universe and change it for the better.